Hi everybody, this is John Watson, and I'm an international master, and we're in the show Ask the Master on ICC TV. The main point of the show is to allow you, the listeners and viewers, to ask questions, and you can do this in advance by sending emails to my account at askimwatson@chessclub.com. That's ASKIMWATSON at chessclub.com, CHESSCLUB.com. So the one more time, that's askimwatson@chessclub.com. You can also participate in the chat window, which is on the right right now, except that I can't see it. So I'll have to play around with that a little bit. Why can't I see that? Not good. Well, that won't be good if I can't see your chat questions, but I do want you to ask these questions. I'll just move it over. Ah, I see it now. Good. It's way too large, but that's okay. In progress, and I'll make it smaller. Beautiful. Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello, Shidki. Yeah, and you can also message me on my ICC account at John L. Watson. That's JOHNLWATSON. And you can even go to Facebook below the broadcast once it's over. It'll be up there forever. And under any broadcast, you can list a question underneath. Probably not the very best way to do it. The best way is to send the email. So that would be the preferred way. Or ask live right now during the show, which is fine. Hello from Italy. This is great. Hello, Filippo. Okay, so you can ask anything about chess, about the chess world, about chess books, about chess strategy, and of course I get many, many questions about openings, which I think is kind of a specialty, but is also the thing that most people are interested in, I think, to improve their play and play better on ICC. They want to know more about why they're getting beat in the opening, so that tends to be a very, very common thing. But you can talk about any of your opinions about the chess world, recent tournaments, great players, and you can send me games, by the way. I've done that pretty often. I don't have any games in the queue right now, but just send me games to that email address, and there's a good chance that we'll take a look at them. They're best if they have some question attached, something that we can look at so that other players looking at the game will be able to get something out of it in terms of instructional value. So that's about it for that. Let me see. I don't have any questions quite yet. Hi, Jordan. So I thought I would just start out with trying to catch up on all the things we've been missing from the last few weeks. I got a comment from Chess Philosopher in last week's chat. It was actually a question. How about the Carey's defense? And that's the Carey's defense, what he calls the Carey's defense. There are actually several Carey's defenses, but this one. And there's a book about this by Einhorn, and at this point he wants you to play the move A5. And he says, how about this defense? Well, I got a comment from somebody by email to say that Sokolov now gives the line knight c3 and says that white has a good game. In fact, this is the superior Nimzo-Indian because the move a5 is bad. And I don't necessarily quite believe that, but I thought, well, I'll look up Einhorn and see what he says. And then I look up, as it turned out, I looked up some other stuff too. So let me first just say what we're talking about here. The Nimzo-Indian version is knight c3, bishop b4, bishop d2. And, I'm sorry about that. c4, knight f6, knight c3, bishop b4, bishop d2. And now it's as if black played a5, which is a bit of a strange move, is the idea. So let's now look at the order that the question was in. Actually, let's just look at this game. But the point is that this order that we just talked about, which was this one, will transpose in most cases if black plays the move knight f6 now. Depends what white does, but normally this would tend to transpose to a normal Nimzo-Indian bishop d2 variation with the move a5. And in fact, that I think is what happens in the game before us, but let's check that out. So I've got a game to illustrate that position because that's the key. No, actually, it did start out this way. This is a game. Einhorn was black in this game, and he's the one of the major users of this system. Okay, so I think in principle, Sokolov is right that a5 is a very odd move. It's certainly not the normal move after bishop d2. On the other hand, bishop d2 is a very uncommon move, and it's rather passive. So it wouldn't be too surprising if black can equalize by various means, including even a move that's a little bit odd, like a5. So we're going to look at this game to show this. Now in this game, white deviates from this. This would be a normal Belgrade-Indian kind of position. Let me show you that actually, just so you can see that. This kind of thing, knight here, check here. This is a very common Belgrade-Indian order. It's in Siliki's book, for example, and white can play here. So that's your sort of standard position. And maybe I'll show you something with this. If you play, for example, right now this move against knight f3, that's a pretty interesting move. That's what Siliki gives, and you'll see that this move a5 can come in handy. And here's why: this is basically a very passive system, bishop d2, and doesn't cause many problems normally. For example, if white goes here, black can just develop, and then very soon he can play takes and knight e4. I mean, even now he could, for example. This is the simple way to. Sorry about that. Let's get that bishop in there. This is the simple way to get rid of this bishop and equalize. This is considered equal, this kind of variation. Black can also castle first. So that's a point about this system. So what white does to avoid this very often is play this move, even though he's already moved that bishop. And so now we have black having an extra free move, a5, in a sort of a normal position. And does that help or hurt? Well, there's one way in which it can help, and that's that he can play a4 here. And this is a really nice threat, a3, because it loosens up all these dark squares. So white's going to play a3. We're going to get that position. I think this is very instructive stuff. That pawn on a4 is actually quite useful now. And it's useful in one other way. You get this kind of position. Now white has more space. These doubled pawns are no big problem because they control the center. Just as and white's about to play bishop d3 and castle, and maybe even try to play for e4. Black has a nice move now, though. I think he can play it instantly, for example. Yeah, he might as well play this move. And one of the ideas there is to play bishop takes f3, attacking the queen, and then if the queen recaptures, rook takes g5, winning a piece. So white would have to play bishop takes f6. It would be very easy equality, at least for black. So there's a threat here, and white would probably go back, and now black can just develop. And it turns out this is a pretty decent version of a normal position for black, a normal kind of setup for both sides. White will never get e4 in easily because this piece can always be chased away, and that square can be covered twice. So this is considered a pretty reasonable position. This is how Einhorn or Siliki talks about playing. So that's maybe a really brief thing. One other thing white could do, just for the record, here is to play, say, queen c2 in this position, thinking about trying to play e4. And in that case, black can castle, but he can also just play d5, trying to stop that move, trying to stop e4. And then a typical example would be something like captures, and then now the bishop coming out, now knight c3. Let's see if I can get this right. Bishop d2, a4, knight c3. Oh, sorry, knight c3 is already in, my fault. Let's go back. Let's go back here. Okay, so that's like this. Now knight c3, now knight f6. Queen c2 now could be played with the idea, but then d5 stops e4 is the idea. And white can take, for example, and put the bishop out here, and black can unpin. And now the idea is that this is still well covered, and black's plan is simply to go castles and rook e8 on the e-file, maybe play bishop out here, here, back here, that kind of thing, this kind of maneuver. So black's very safe here. This was played in one game, and now black has to take this, otherwise knight takes d5 happens. And then black played here, and this is considered equal. It's a kind of Queen's Gambit, Nimzo-Indian position, but white's developed very slowly. It's very easy for black to play. Okay, that's just to give you some background. Now in this game, white tried to take advantage of the particular move order by playing this clever move. And this has almost never been played, but it's a very interesting move. The idea is that if black takes the pawn here, white plays here with a double attack on the knight and the pawn. And this position is, if black plays here, then white gets two bishops really for no real compensation. Black's having a hard time castling because he's already moved that rook. And white has the bishop pair. So for example, if black played some simple move like that, white might just play there and put his other bishop on the long diagonal. And white stands better in positions like this because black has a hard time getting castled, for one thing. So just want to show you that, and then the other move black could try to make would be to take this, but then of course white wins his pawn back, first of all, and then just recaptures. And once again, white has more space and it's hard for black to get castled. This one's a little tighter. This is not that bad. Black can play this way, but I still prefer white in this kind of position. He's got a little more space and he's going to castle kingside safely. Where's this king going to go? Not so easy. So this move e4 is kind of clever. So what black does is he ignores that and counterattacks in the center. Instead of playing bishop takes and knight takes e4, he doesn't accept the sacrifice. And white advances. And now the problem is black can't really go back because after taking, white's going to be threatening to just win a pawn. And if black has to lose this much time, it's not really a good thing. What would be the easiest way to play this? Maybe queen g4 here even would be a nice move. That looks pretty good, doesn't it? Black can't castle here. You should all know this trick, by the way, because of bishop h6 threatening checkmate. There's no way for a piece to come out and defend it, so the pawn has to move, and then you win material. So queen g4 would be quite a good move, I think, because black would have to defend that pawn artificially by making big weaknesses or maybe moving the king. So that's why black can't play the knight back like he might in a French defense or something. That means that black has to move forward instead, and does so in this game here. And white plays this. Now he could just develop, but then I think black's probably okay. Black can just play some sort of captures, probably on... oh, actually, there is a game with this where he castles, then he captures again, and simply plays b6, with the idea of getting the bishop out to a6 and exchange white's good bishop. And this is pretty playable. This is pretty easy for black to play. So in this game, white plays that way, tries to get rid of that piece immediately, and black plays this move, queen h4. I'm not so sure that really works. That threatens checkmate in one move, so it's very clever. It might be easier for black to play just capturing and then capturing. And I think white's a little bit better in this position, but you can play this. You can play this very easily. You just play for the move bishop a6 and try to get rid of this bishop. Just for example, there. Now this is attacked twice, and if white takes it, you start getting rid of... you stop white from castling and get rid of some pieces. So white has space, maybe even slightly better game because black's not really coordinated very well, but it's close. It's just about equal. So it shows that this line's what you could do to play against knight c3. In this game, black, let's just look at how this works. In this game we have this order, queen h4, a clever move. The idea is that if g3, which is very natural, black plays knight takes, which threatens this queen, and then he has queen e4 check coming. So white has to take this, and we get to a position like that, and it just turns out this position's okay for black. It's kind of a simplified position, so it works out okay. The other thing white could try is taking this knight here, but then there's queen e4 check, and this is relatively solid and relatively acceptable, this kind of position. For example, black can win a pawn temporarily with that move because this bishop's pinned. Yeah, it's maybe, white has some compensation here. White can play this position, but it's still, again, it's interesting. The problem is the move white plays, which is that very nice move. Simply protects against mate and stays out of the way. It means that a move like g3 is going to be pretty good pretty soon. It's going to be a problem. And so black has to figure out how to kind of simplify the position. He does that. He takes twice and plays this check. But this time this check can be answered by that nice little move. And black takes, and black captures, and plays this move. And once again, this move bishop a6 is going to give black halfway decent play, get rid of white's best piece. But this time white's got, this file, this knight can go to a lot of nice squares. The center, he's got an extra center pawn to play with. That pawn on c3 is actually good. So white is somewhat better here. And so that's an example of what might happen in this a5 line. Someone was asking about a5. Remember, the point of playing this, by the way, is you're hoping for a French defense. That's your favorite opening. And if you get this opening instead with c4, you'd rather not play into a Nimzo or Queen's Indian immediately. You'd rather give this check and see what happens. Try and tie white down a little bit. That's the idea. So, pretty interesting stuff, I think. Now let me look at the chat here. We've got tons of stuff to go over. Whoa, look at this. This is fantastic. Very good, you guys. Can you show an example of how an opening can lead to a great middle game position? Well, hopefully a lot of the openings we show, we will be showing that. You'll see a couple today even. It's a very general question. I can't just come up with a single example off the top of my head, but many games that happens. So you will be seeing those. Good question. Can you show us some ideas in the Pierts? Also a very broad question, but I can certainly show you some ideas. I noticed many recent books about the London system and a few chess-based DVDs, one from Nigel Davies and one from Danielson. Any suggestions? Okay, we've talked about the London system nearly every week. I should mention that the indices of openings that we've discussed are up on my Facebook page, John L. Watson. It's on the timeline. So if you go to John L. Watson and look at the timeline, I keep updating the list of the openings we've covered. The London has been our big, most popular one. We've looked at this again and again. So we've looked at it from Black's point of view and White's point of view. Just last week we looked at some more. And I'm sure we'll be looking at more in the future. But I would first go back and look at some of the old shows. You can also send me an email with a specific question. Like here, I played this London system. What should I do, either as white or as black? So yes, there's Davies, Danielson. There's two books. There's a book by Sedlak recently, and there's a book by somebody else, very, very recent, that we've been quoting. Can you show how to play the black side of the London to combat the dark square bishop on f4? I give you the same answer there. I think both Filippo and Jonathan, you haven't been on this show before because we do this almost every week. I could actually show you again, and I will if we get time. Yeah, my apologies because I don't have a specific London games shown right at this point. During the recent Bliss Championship in Doha, GM Yobov experimented black in a special Petrov. Okay, let's take a look at that. Okay. We haven't talked much about the Petrov. We talked about just about everything. Oh, look at this, Defa. I didn't know about this game. This is great. Yobava is a great experimental player. He's wonderful to watch. He plays all kinds of interesting games. Two games, one with Bach and one with Karyakin. Very interesting to see the Karyakin game. I didn't see these games, unfortunately, even though I commented on Doha. I didn't see these particular games. So I don't know if I can say for sure. I guess the point is just to get really quick activity here. And in return for what looks like it might be a pawn. I guess the most obvious thing to do here is capture this. And you might want to tell me what happens at this point. I mean, offhand, it looks like black is just going to be a pawn down. So as usual with Yobava's things, there's more to it than meets the eye. I don't think queen here does any good, really, because of queen here. Knight takes looks kind of slow. White just develops normally. So maybe the idea is queen takes. You can tell me the idea on the chat, by the way. And then after d4, maybe what, c5? This is a crazy gambit. Typical Yobava. He does all kinds of things that no one's done in 150 years worth of chess. We love him for this because it's so much fun to have some new original stuff going on. I wonder if that's his idea, just to get a lot of attack going. I'm just guessing completely. I have no idea. Because, but this would be a way of getting some initiative, maybe. Although I don't think this is going to work. Ouch. This looks very, very tough for black. He's very exposed. Castling next. Ouch. No, that's probably not Yobava's idea. He's too smart for that one. I'm so embarrassed that I don't know. I wish I'd seen. I can't even understand what his idea is after taking. You might want to tell me on the chat. You may have already done that. Okay, now let me go over and look at the chat again. I'll tell you about the London thing in just a second, but let's do this first. Someone mentioned really liking the book due to a novel approach. They said it was more the why and not the what. Is that so novel? Thoughts? No, that isn't so novel. Quite a few books talk about the ideas of openings or books as opposed to just the moves. And a lot of people like reading that. I think the only thing about that is it can get very sloppy because you'll find that when you try to apply it, it's more fun in a way to think philosophically about moves. So it makes good reading. Sometimes it doesn't make that good teaching because the why is very subtle in chess. The why tends to be very concrete and not particularly philosophic. But that's the two. That is sort of the break in how to write books, and the best books have both. They have the moves and the analysis, but they also have some thoughts about what the overall ideas about the position are. And I'd like to do that too. Give some ideas about these positions. You have me so curious here. What is black even trying to do here? I just don't know. I hope you can show me this. Yeah, thank you, chess philosopher. Yeah, it was a great question, by the way. Oh, here we go. Thank you. Filippo Nicolo, very good, thank you, is d4, queen d5, d4, knight c6. Sure, that looked better than c5, didn't it? I didn't like c5. Yeah, this looks better, but I was wondering here whether it just looks so slow. How about just coming back? I guess bishop g4, and then castle queenside really fast. Wow, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, if he repeated it, he must have some faith in it for sure. So, not just knight f3. I wonder what the trick is here. This is wonderful. I mean, we really love Yobaba. He just does crazy things. I don't get this. Why would this be? He has to play bishop g4 and get more pressure in the center, I think. But then bishop e2. Now, notice, everybody, that if you take that and try to win a pawn, you lose your queen to this check. And then queen takes queen. That's a trick you should know about. I'm not even really sure why you can't play knight takes c6, although at least there you can see that black's getting some pressure because the bishop can't develop. In other words, a position like this, white can't move his bishop out because of queen takes g2. I mean, you can try it, but he probably doesn't want to. And f3 is very weakening. And black has 2 pieces ahead in development, and it's his move. This I see compensation in. Maybe not enough, but at least it's something. He has bishop f5 followed by castling queenside. He has just bishop d6 hitting some weak dark squares. He has bishop e7. Bishop e6 blockades d5 and threatens castles. This one I can see. I can absolutely see this. So knight takes c6 seems like a good move for black. Okay, and black is threatening this. So the most natural move on the board is going like that. And the question is, does black have enough development? He does have very nice development to make up for, and maybe Filippo has an idea about this, what white should do here. The Y moves, as you say, are always very concrete, based on variations. Yeah, exactly. Since the Y is, but sometimes you can talk about the Y in general. In other words, white wants to prepare winning this outpost, or white wants to double pawn so we can get an attack and gain certain squares. And I think people like that if they're said in words. A lot of people enjoy being told in words why something is good or not. And I do a fair amount of this even on this show. So, so I'll try to mix both the why and the what being the moves. But that's it. You're absolutely right. There is this problem that the exact moves are often the best way to explain why you make moves, because you learn it more subtly. In other words, if I tell you that in this position, if I don't show you this variation, maybe this is the point. If I just say why, what is black doing? Well, he's way ahead in development. He's got some extra pieces out. Of course, he's about to lose time with his queen, probably. So the why of this move is to get another piece out. But is there a concrete variation involved? Well, there might be. I mean, if white went here, maybe you could take here, for example, and mess up black's pawns, or pin here. It might be a very concrete thing. But in general, the idea is just stay away. The why, the what involves the fact that you can keep bringing your pieces out and you don't lose time with the queen. The why might be just, I'm getting a big lead in development, I'm going to castle queenside, I'm going to attack the center. So just for example, maybe I should try this again. You know, maybe this bishop just comes out really fast and you get rook over and queen over. Okay, now we're talking. Yeah, maybe this is worth something. If he castled right into it, this could be a big attack for black. That I can understand. Although even this position, I doubt if you can play this move because of knight moves, knight g5 or knight e5. See, now I'm getting into it. Here we go. Here's an example of the why and the why versus the what. The why is, look at black. He's got a huge lead in development. He's got rooks that can come over really fast, maybe sacrifice here, maybe come up. He's got an attack on the king side. The what might be, okay, what's his plan against that move? If he takes, white's just a pawn up really for very little, I would say, almost nothing. So he has to do something else. If he waits around, it's a little unlikely. He might be able to let you take and take this way. Now we're talking about the what. We're talking about the very concrete things. But if he takes, which is the most natural move, because he's hoping for this position, which is very, very hard to defend against this kind of threat. In fact, almost impossible. I have to assume this would be pretty good for black. Maybe not winning, but very difficult. The problem is you just move this knight. So there's the what. The why is pretty easy for black. He's attacking. The what for black is not so easy because now we're attacking the queen. And these positions are not always easy to handle, because the queen can even get trapped. Look at how the queen's kind of stuck. Maybe this move, but then of course we can attack it again. Okay, maybe something like that. Now you know your Baba has this worked out, so yeah, you still can't take that piece. Anyway, you know he's got a ton of analysis on this. I'm sure he's worked this all out. Oh, here we go. Here's the game. Queen e2. Queen e2 looks very odd. Okay, let's look at Queen e2. Excellent idea, though. This comes from a game, and it worked, so let's take a look at it. Wonderful, you guys. Thank you very much. Oh, and thank you for the compliment. Oh, we're really heading out here. And I will get back to that London thing. It's just that we've covered it so often, I'll have to kind of try and figure out the most important things that I've said, because I didn't want to turn people off to it. Okay, here we go. So here's our example. You know, normally I try to keep up with what's going on, but I don't always keep up. I have not seen this move at all. Not at all. Okay, does this come from correspondence or a regular game? Queen e2. Now see, that surprises me because it seems like it doesn't develop a piece. So bishop e7, I assume. Bishop c5. No, he wouldn't allow a discovered check, would he? He wouldn't allow that. No, I think I've got it wrong. I've done something wrong here. Oh, the A is a bishop. My fault. It's not a D, it's an A. No, that doesn't make sense either. Give me a second, I'll get this. Okay, c takes d5, d5, takes. No, queen e2. Then I have here bishop c5. That makes no sense, I don't think. Bishop c5 looks like just an awful move. For one thing, there's check, and you have to justify losing your rook. And even if you could justify that, you could also just win time, as you say, on the queen. And I'm clearly doing something wrong here. It could be that we have the notation wrong. Then knight back, attacking the bishop and taking the queens off, which is going to be just a pawn up for nothing. Yes, it seems good enough for white. I think black was not a very good player, is my guess. No offense to Mr. Laverick if he is. He might even be an international master or something, but it doesn't look right. Anybody is black here. If Yobava would not play bishop c5, he would play. My guess, I don't like bishop e6 too much because I want more aggressive with that bishop, so maybe just bishop e7. And now black has a lead in development. White has to get his bishop out somehow. And after he gets attacked like that, he probably just goes back to... good question. Not easy. Maybe d6? Could go all the way back because the queen's awkwardly placed, and you could play castles and rook e8. This is a position you could think about playing because you're going to get a rook to e8 really fast. So you've lost your lead in development, but his development is suddenly very shaky. So, you know, you get the feeling from something like this that white should be better, but not necessarily clearly better. So I'm not so sure I'm thrilled about queen e2. Be interesting to see what Karyakin and... oh, here we go. Karyakin played knight c6. Okay, knight c3, queen d4, knight c6. Wow. Okay, hang on. So I'm sorry. So he played... okay, it was like this. It was d4, knight c6, knight c3 takes knight c6, forcing this move, it looks like. And I assume knight d1, probably. King d1 looks too exposed. There's too many pieces left on the board. You probably want to play knight takes. This, to me, looks okay for black. Very safe. Typical Karyakin. He knows he can win endgames against people. He's a player. He just wants to play it safe. He doesn't want to walk into any prepared analysis. Very interesting. Yeah, so knight c3. What a move. I'm having trouble with my pieces here for some reason. There we go. Okay, so d4, knight c6. Yeah, I wanted to just come back. That's my first instinct, but there may be something totally wrong with that. Yobava is he knows what he's doing. So, but knight c3 doesn't make much sense to me. I don't like the looks of it. I mean, it might be okay to equalize, but it doesn't look like much. Okay. Okay. Instead, Bach played knight c6, queen e2 check. Thank you for these notes, by the way. And after bishop e7, queen a5, we went to endgame one pawn up. Okay, I'm a little confused. He played. Oh, I see. Knight c6 here. No, he played knight c6 here, takes, queen takes, check to get queen b5 in, and get the queens off. Yes, but black has good development. Black had some compensation with rapid development. Very good, very good. So Filippo Nicolo is reporting on the game with Bach and Yobava, and he made a very good statement about the game, which is that, yeah, sure, white's getting the queens off, but I bet black has just enough bishop e7. Well, maybe white's a tiny bit better. You know, a pawn is a pawn among these very, very top players, but there's no question that white's going to have to suffer to convert his pawn because black's got a big lead in development. Now, how he does this exactly, I'm not sure. He can risk getting the doubled pawn so that he gets a lot of open files. In other words, he can just castle, or he can just say, hey, look at this position. You can't get your bishop out, and I'm way ahead in development. So, okay, so maybe white's better here, but he has to prove it. Here's my feeling. My feeling is that you or I, probably especially you, are going to have a hard time winning this as white because black has this wonderful development. There'll be a lot of tactics. You can also, by the way, in a position like, I should show you, a position like this, even though white's got an extra pawn and black has doubled pawns, there's these pawn breaks and open lines, and it's not easy to play. So, by the way, this is the why. This is the why it's not so easy. Why black might allow this. So, the point is, my computer is very slow today. I'm really sorry about this. It's just not responding very fast. So, what was I going to say? Oh, so in practice, black might be okay here. In theory, okay, you play this against Magnus Carlsen, he probably just holds on to the pawn and probably wins a long endgame. That's my guess. Maybe even gives back the pawn at some point, but has the better game. Yeah, there we go. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Filippo Nicolo. That was absolutely terrific, and that does explain everything, except it doesn't explain to me why white is losing so much time in development. I don't. It's a very, very strange idea. I guess he just doesn't want to get too far behind in development, but that's sort of the normal move here. This is like there's a whole bunch of openings that kind of lead to this kind of position. Black's he's a tempo ahead of all those openings, but it's only really a tempo ahead. Maybe two. No, he's really only about one tempo ahead. I don't know. It looks awfully solid for white. Just simple moves. You might want to look at that. I'll look at it for next week. I'll give you an answer about next week. If two top players like that didn't play this way, there's probably a reason. So, can you show some ideas in the Pierce? Okay, yeah, we're going back to that. I can show you a lot of ideas in the Pierce, but maybe that's also a question of, it's too awfully general a question. So I should probably show you specific lines, which means maybe I'll wait till next week for that. Let me just tell you what we've covered in the London a little bit, since we've done so much London things, just so you can go back and look at a lot of it. First of all, we've covered both kinds of Londons. We've covered the King's Indian defense London, this kind of thing, a lot. You know, this sort of thing. So that's one thing we've done a lot of for both sides. We've looked at C5 systems for black, and we've looked at E5 systems. We've looked at it from white's point of view and from black's point of view. And we've looked at we've talked a lot about whether you should make that move H3 early, or you can afford to wait a little bit, so that other defenses. It's a whole tempo to play H3, and sometimes that hurts your defensive ideas. So that's one thing we've looked at, and in great length. And then we've also looked at playing the London, and this we've looked at even more against D4, D5. We've looked at this kind of thing. And just recently, I think it was just last week, we started looking for about the third or fourth time we looked at this main line, which goes something like, I mean, I'm just going to get the moves in. One of these. The sort of thing that So played against Sedlak. Sedlak's book has a bunch about this. Kamsky has played the white side of this numerous times. It's kind of the main line now. Recently, my friend Jim Tarzan had an exact game with this. And in fact, I played a practice game with him with this. What am I thinking of? And so we had this position. And there's old tricks. We showed you all the old tricks that white was playing for in this position. But anyway, Wesley So played this very nice game. Everybody plays B6 now. I'm sorry about the castles. We're going to play B6. Yeah, okay, what do we got here? White's move. Okay, black's move. B6. That's the main move now. Or at least it's the safest move. And we looked at this quite a lot. The famous old trick, I'll show one more time since everybody loves it so much. They may not have seen it. Oh, by the way, I think this system's fine for black. If you want to just play right into this main line, I think you'll have a good time. It's quite easy to play. One of the ideas, especially if you know, you've got to learn the ideas. One of the ideas is that if white plays for this knight e5 thing, you can work around him. You can play knight e7 to here in many cases. For example, this exact position you can play something like this, and if f4, you can play knight back. And one good thing about knight e7 to f5 is it also gives you knight e4 because now the bishop is defending that square, so that blocks off white's ability to capture on e4. And these positions are really well known. They're all over the place now. You'll see a lot of games with them, but they're recently been investigated seriously for the first time. I like that Danielson DVD, by the way. It's kind of fun. I like Nigel Davies's too, which is an older one, or unless he updated it. So I would look into those lines. When does Tata Steel start, and who's the favorite in your opinion? It starts very soon. I'll be doing some commentary on ICC on it, and I'm trying to remember exactly who is and isn't in it. Almost all the world's top players except what? Except Carlsen, obviously. I'm trying to think. Just a great lineup of players. It'll be really fun. A lot of really good dynamic players. I could look it up real quickly, or someone else could. Who's missing and who isn't missing out of that? It's got pretty much the usual suspects. You know, Geary and like Shirley-Grov and Nakamura. I think are all playing. I'm pretty sure they're all playing. Not positive. You'd have to check that. I could maybe really quickly take a look at where would I find that? I could find that in the ChessBase database real fast, for example. ChessBase website. Like I say, more than chess. Here we go. Let's just look and see. I think if you wanted to look at favorites, you would look pretty much just almost exactly by rating and then just add that anybody can win these tournaments. That's how good these top guys are. Oh, here we go. So Carlsen, I'm sorry, Carlsen is playing. Already wrong. So, Karyakin, Aronian, Geary, Doptomniachtchi. Okay, so Nakamura isn't playing, and Kramnik isn't playing, and but the two top, that'll be interesting to see Carlsen and Karyakin, of course. So just for the listeners, this is the Tata Steel A tournament in Holland, in the Netherlands, and Karyakin is the highest rated player. I'll do it in order. Then So, Wesley So, Sergei Karyakin, Levan Aronian, Anish Geary, Ian Doptomniachtchi, which is really fun because he's playing such fun chess. I'm really glad to see him doing well. He's up to 2767, which is magnificent, and he's a fun player, and I think we need more fun players. Hari Krishna also has been playing beautifully recently, so he's been invited. He's a fun player. Elyanov, who has gotten very good in his a little late in his career compared to the other players. And Wojciech, I think, is a wonderful player from Poland. He's a magnificent player. It's great to see him play in these top tournaments. And Dryakin, of course, has played brilliantly in the past. I haven't seen him around as much in the big tournaments. And Wai Yi is, of course, getting a big name from China. And Rapport is always eccentric and wonderful to watch. Luc van Veli, and Bhaskaran Adiban, who's a very aggressive and fun player from India. So this is a great crew, I would say, especially the bottom half, or sort of the middle to bottom, have all kinds of fun players. So I think you're going to enjoy this. Okay, let me get back to my chat screen. Oh, you wanted to know a favorite. Well, I guess Carlsen's always the favorite, isn't he? What can you say? And of course, So is on fire, so he's somewhat of a favorite. But so those two are the favorites. I hate to cop out and be so obvious. But watch the games in Pomniachtchi. Rapport is always fun to watch. There are going to be some fun games in this tournament. Adiban is fun to watch. Okay, hello, Master. I'm playing the closed variation against the Sicilian. What do you recommend against the Botvinnik setup? I used to play the Botvinnik setup as black when I played the Sicilian, so I'm prejudiced. I like it as black. But what he's talking about is in the closed Sicilian, if black simply plays the fianchetto system. This is the closed Sicilian, the main line anyway. And if black plays this system with g6, which is probably the most common at the top level, now white has a lot of choices. White can play with f4 and then knight f3, or just knight f3, or knight e2, or bishop e3 before all the other moves. So it sort of depends on the line, but against almost every one of those, black can play the move e5. Even if white plays f4, for example, black can play the move e5 here. And I used to, in fact, play that move sometimes. Sometimes I'd wait. But certainly against these kinds of moves, I would play e5 very happily. The question is, what should white do about it? That's a great question, because since I played it as black, I'm prejudiced. But let me think about that. What used to drive me crazy? Well, one thing you can try to do is to play for a3 and b4. Let me see. Maybe I would say, first of all, why don't you go into these lines? Why don't you go into the f4 lines? And if they insist on playing that, which they may not, they may play like this, and you have to learn those lines. But if they play here, go ahead and put your knight on f3, which is more aggressive than e2. And go ahead and castle. And now, maybe just a move like king h1, or h3, or a3. So some of the top players who played the closed like to play a3 and b4 with rook b1, and usually bishop d2. But you have to get the timing right. I don't know which move would come first. Probably bishop d2. I'm just guessing. Probably bishop, maybe a3. I used to think in terms of being a little more worried about, when I thought about playing this for white, although I didn't think about it very much, I did consider playing king h1. For one thing, that gives you a square to go to with your bishop when it gets attacked. And so it's still aiming at the queen side in the center, but it's more secure on that square. And the other thing it does is it just makes way to play moves like g4 and f5. If you can, and it means you don't get checked with queen b6 check or bishop check. It just gets you out of the way of a lot of awkward moves. It's kind of a high-class waiting move, asking black what he wants to do. White would love to get f5 in, but it's very hard to do. That's your attacking move, but it's very hard to actually achieve. The other thing you can try to do is get h3, let me just show you this idea, h3 with arrows, and g4 in, and f5. At that point he'll take, of course, to win these dark squares in the center. But it's playable to play that way. You can do these things. I guess I'd like to get my pieces out first, and getting my pieces out involves either bishop d2 and or maybe this queen side activity. I just don't think you can do anything on the king side in these positions. Now, if you don't like playing f4, and a lot of close Sicilian players don't like to, you've got the same problem that e5 is just extremely solid. This move e5 is hard to play against. You know, black sets up like this. I'm not helping much, am I? I'm trying to be giving you some help as white. What would I do as white in these positions? Okay, here's one idea. Here's an idea. Can you get an early h4 in? Because that's what I do in the reverse position. I wonder even right now if it might be worth throwing an h4 in. Or no, make one more move. No, maybe now even. h4? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what theory says about this. The problem then, of course, is you can switch to that move, stopping h5. So that's probably not that great an idea. Yeah, now the knight e2 systems, what did I used to fear? I didn't fear very much. Maybe you can get c3 in quickly, knight d5 and c3. You know, just play knight d5. It's a little boring to play this way, but it's possible. And then what you do is you play for c3 and d4. If you play bishop g5 here, then usually what happens is that's a good move, because this check doesn't work because of king over. So you want to avoid that. That just wins a piece. And this move is unimpressive, because taking this bishop off for this bishop isn't so impressive when black has his pawns on dark squares and you have your pawns on light squares. You've been left with your bad bishop. Now that doesn't mean white stands badly here, because white's also eliminated the defender of the king side. So you could play this way. Black will sometimes avoid this happening by playing an h6 move, maybe even right now. The other thing is you have to be willing to play with what's called a dead point in the center. You know, you could castle, and then you have to be willing to play that kind of position, which is really not that bad, but has a bad reputation. That's called a dead point. And so, if you weren't white has an extra tempo, so white's probably doing reasonably well here, but if you were black, you wouldn't be happy with this position. Not helping much, am I? I've got the wrong side. I respect the Botvinnik system very, very much. I would play the f4 line, though, Juan. I would play the f4 line against it. Play aggressively. Thanks for going to that line. Be BOGO, accelerated BOGO more accurate. Yeah, it could be. It is kind of like accelerated BOGO. I don't know if it's really more accurate. What are you avoiding exactly? It's better if you're trying to play. Oh, okay. Rather than e6 immediately. Okay, let's see if that's true. That's a good question. Why is everybody so excited about playing this order? Because if you play here. Oh, maybe because the Nimzo-Indian. In other words, let's do this. Maybe you're playing this because after this move, you don't really want to play into a Nimzo-Indian right away. You don't want to commit to knight f6. So that's why it would be more accurate. Maybe you're going to play knight e7 in some lines, or even the bizarre knight h6 sometimes. Probably not, but maybe. And I think we talked about this last week, that this keeps more flexibility for black. Now, to my mind, this is probably as good as anything. But, you know, you might even play f5. I don't know what... what Einhorn says about this in his book. There's probably everybody who writes a book about bishop b4 check gives a move here. I wouldn't be surprised if it's f5, if it's not f5, and then knight f6. So you don't have to move the knight, and then maybe you go for this kind of situation. It depends what white does. So yeah, it could be an advantage to play it in an accelerated fashion, but it could also be a disadvantage unless you want to play into certain lines after this move. So I don't know. I think there's a trade-off. I don't know if I would say it was more accurate, but it's certainly playable. John, is there a better draw for one side, either stalemate, draw, repetition, 15 move, resign? I know it's one. Is there an edge for a particular draw over others? No, I think a draw is just a draw, Jordan. If you're trying to get a draw at some point, you can get a stalemate or repetition or whatever. You just take it. So no, you don't get any extra credit one way or another. So no, it just doesn't really matter. I guess you got to go home earlier if you can get something before the 50 move roll. So, so that has an advantage. Okay, Filippo, are you from Italy? Yeah, exactly. I think post-Yoda makes a good philosophic point about the human brain not always liking to just see moves, one move after another, looking dozen moves ahead. So we have to find other ways to understand, to work around that unattainable level of concreteness, very well phrased. And these patterns, if you study enough concrete lines, if I move there, he moves there, you'll start to notice patterns. You don't have to use words necessarily to learn general things about chess. I think pattern recognition is generally considered a very important thing in chess. Just, they say grandmasters know at least 100,000 basic patterns. Okay, let me go back down. I prefer the system against the London, later play e6. And queen b2, yeah, but you can't always get queen b6 in. Gregory is saying that against the London, I guess we are talking about the d4, d5 London. We're not talking about the King's Indian London or the Grunfeld London. We're just talking about d4, d5. That he likes to go ahead and play for c5. You can play c5 right away, by the way. It's not a bad move either. And if white plays there, now a lot of times white will play there to kind of work against this, but it turns out that this is premature to play right now. I understand you said knight c6 first, but I just wanted to explain that. This move, this is very strong. He really can't take that pawn because knight b5 is too strong. The queen gets in a lot of trouble. It's a little complicated, but it works out. So knight c6 would be played first, still with the idea of queen b6. And now a lot of times in order to meet queen b6, white plays that move, and if queen b6, white just plays this move and sort of spoils your plan. That's something that happens. But even if white makes a slow move here, I'm thinking queen b6 still isn't that great a move. No, I think it is. If white plays really slowly here, it's possible queen b6 has become a pretty good move by this point. Because white can't play queen c1 because that's hanging. Some people play d takes c5, but I've never really believed it that much. Carlsen played it in the World Championship, but even there I didn't believe it very much. It was just something to do. So usually white anticipates queen b6 and plays c3. That's the position you'll see most often. And then after that move, now white can still play queen c1. The only problem with that move is there's a little bit of potential pressure coming down this file with c takes d, with a rook on c8. So sometimes you'll see that. I think white's pretty happy against that, but not enough to stand better than equal. One thing about the London is black can definitely equalize. That's just the fact. It's sad to say, but if black knows what he's doing, you're not going to get some small advantage like you might do in some other openings. The London is a fairly passive opening. It's a good opening, it's a logical opening, but you're really counting on your middle game and end game abilities, not your opening. You're not going to bowl him over in the opening unless the other guy doesn't know what he's doing. Yeah, so normally you'll get this move. And of course black can now just develop, like we just saw, playing like this. Or bishop e7, by the way, is not a bad line either. Anyway, yeah, good point. Queen b6 is a good idea in certain positions. There's that queen b1 idea, Korobov against Dominguez at Qatar. Well, sure, there's the main line. I don't know if you mean this. There's a queen b1 that happens in this position. This may be what you mean. Something like... now, a lot of times white doesn't castle here. White plays queen e2, or maybe even queen b1 right away. I think it's been played, queen b1. It's also been played next move, I think, after here and here. I think queen b1 has been played. if that's what you mean. I'm not sure if that's the one you mean. On bishop g5, why not f6 in the Sicilian, as we see in the English Botvinnik variation, knight ge7. Okay, which Sicilian? Oh, you didn't have a chance to play f6 in that line. I'm sorry, in that Botvinnik line, because there was the f6 was hanging. There was a knight and a bishop on it, in the order that I played it. Let me show you that real fast. Yeah, maybe I went too fast there. This is the closed Sicilian again with the Botvinnik variation. By the way, this is a great line for black, for people who are watching. Yeah, we were looking at this kind of thing. You can play e5 right away, by the way, but I think d6 is more common. And we were just looking at the line with, for example, here, here, here. Now, knight e7 is not necessary. You could play h6 first, for example. We were looking at this, and you can't play f6 now because it's not supported. You see that now? There's a knight and a bishop on it. That's why I played castles and allowed, you know, check or whatever. Actually, maybe not. Maybe that wasn't my position that I was showing you exactly. Oh, I was showing you this move, and then knight check, lost a piece, or bishop f6, and you never had a chance to play f6. And if you castle with the idea of playing f6, then this move starts to look really good. And here's a trick to know as white. After that check, black's not going to give up his good bishop, or not going to let your bishop come in on the dark square, so he's going to play over. This move can be quite good. I haven't analyzed it, but I've played things like this before as white. You're really threatening to have a huge threat to play there, followed by rook there, checkmate. It's a lot of fun. And if black plays here, well, you can let that bishop sit there, because if he takes it, there's going to be a checkmate anyway, with pawn takes pawn. So you would just play here, attacking the pawn, although you can't take it yet, maybe. Actually, you might be able to take it. And then just keep attacking. Maybe you wouldn't play queen d2. I'm not sure about that. You might play. Right. Well, anyway, it's something to think about. That this tends to be a pretty good idea. h5 immediately, I'm not sure about, because he has this stupid move. Yeah, a lot of times that doesn't work, h5 immediately, but pretty soon h5 becomes a threat, and so that's worth remembering. And if you don't like that, having the king there and the bishop here is a pretty good combination. So you could start with this move, and then on h6, h4 transposes, or what else could you start with? Probably nothing much else. So even this position is not necessarily horrible for black, but it's a little difficult. Anyway, I hope that answered the question. D4, a book of Einhorn, yes. Well, we talked about that. I was talking about Einhorn's book. And in fact, I looked up, when I gave the answer to that line, some of that was from Einhorn. The game I showed with that line was Einhorn. So maybe you didn't see the beginning of the show, but that was an Einhorn game that we looked at in that line. What are some good lines for white against the Dutch? Again, a very general question. Jonathan Russell asks these very, very general questions. You're talking about things that have whole books written about them, so it's very hard to cover everything. So you asked about the Peerts and the Dutch, and maybe those are things I can think about talking about more generally next week, because it's very hard to say. I mean, if you want to get out of theory, you can play what I've played a bunch, which is that move. There are two moves that get you out of theory right away. They don't get you out of theory, actually, but they get you out of long, complicated lines. They get you out of playing real famous. For example, if you play this, you have to meet the Leningrad, the Classical, the Stonewall, and the Antoshan. So there's all this stuff that you have to play against, and it gets worse as you go along. For example, if black plays the Leningrad, and you play here, and he plays here, and you play here, and he goes here. Well, there's just so many lines here to learn. As black can play this move, black can play this move, black can play knight c6, and there's a lot of theory. So sometimes, I don't know if you're asking this, but a simpler way to get around the Dutch is to play one of the sort of semi-irregular lines. They're not really that irregular, everybody knows about them now, but at least they aren't all worked out, so you have to memorize a lot of variations. That's an interesting move, just thinking about pushing. And if he plays there, you can play bishop g5, or you can even think about bishop f4. Both moves are interesting. Bishop g5 is sort of the main move. And if he plays this move, then bishop f4 becomes more relevant, because you have a nicer diagonal there. And I've played this myself as white sometimes. You just get your pieces out. It's not like there's any super plan here that's going to checkmate black immediately. It's just a good development, and trying to take advantage of the fact that black's cut off his own bishop. So that's one idea. The other idea is, well, if you want to, now here you do have to learn some theory, but this variation is quite popular. I don't know what its current theoretical status is, but for a while it seemed like white was a little better in most lines. The idea is kind of bizarre. It's to play for this checkmate on h5. So you might play this. You can play either move. You can play e3 or e4. And the idea is that he can't take the bishop because of this. And if he tries to play knight up here, then I think you play bishop e2. Is that right? Or do you play e5 first? No, you play e5, of course, in this position. That would be quite good for white, actually. So nobody plays knight f6 there. What do they play there? Well, they don't play g5 very often, but if they do play g5, I guess they play rook h7 here, so that after check they can play here. And there's all kinds of theory here. This goes on and on and on and on. Like I say, you have to decide between e3 or e4. Now this one you have to look up and study and look at the games. The other one you really also ought to look up and study and look at the games, but at least you aren't going to get mated quickly or lose pieces or get in trouble. I guess those would be quick suggestions. I've got a problem with c4, e5, g3, knight c6. Hey, wait, am I ever going to get to the stuff I was going to show today? Maybe I should get to a little bit of that. Yeah, okay, there's that bishop f4, queen's gambit. And there's the rook b1 dragon I keep threatening to do. We'll have to get to that next week. I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to show you one more thing that I prepared, because otherwise I'll get too far behind from things that people have sent me. But I will answer this question about the English opening with f5 as black, Gregory's question next week. Let's finish this week with one extra look, and then Elliot, I'll get to your rook b1. I covered your bishop g5 lines, which I think were fascinating, in the dragon, and we'll get rook b1 next week for sure. And also we'll get to this queen's gambit, bishop f4 question. But because we don't have much time, I think I'm going to show you something pretty simple, a fairly easy line to show, which would be the one from the, another Elliot question that we never got to, which was the Belgrade Gambit. And at least that's simple to do, so let's just do that first. Otherwise we'll just be totally out of time. Okay, this is the Sachs-Karpov game that Elliot told me about. That he said, Elliot used to play the Belgrade, and when we were in the chat, people were asking about the Belgrade Gambit. Okay, now there's the four knights. The Belgrade Gambit, now normally in the four knights you tend to do this move, and you can also do the, for a long time I prepared with a grandmaster actually, we prepared these lines, the Gleck variation, where you just go like this in castle. And black can play d5 there, so it's, you have to look at the stuff. But the Belgrade is an old line, which is no longer that respectable, I guess, here. And Elliot mentioned that the move played in this game by Karpov, very simple kind of equalizer. I don't think it's any more than equalizing, and Sachs did draw the game, so we'll take a look at this game. One very interesting move is just to take this. And white pins, and it looks pretty bad, right? Because the knight can't move and the queen can't unpin it. But then he can make that move, and now white can play knight g5 or knight d2. And I think knight g5 is the most interesting move. If knight d2, threatening to simply take this move d3 follows, and if pawn takes, you have this move knight d4. And this is no fun at all, because positionally white's got a crummy game here, because of this stupid pawn and the fact the bishop isn't getting out this beautiful knight, so this isn't working. So what he does instead of that is plays queen takes, d3 here, and then knight b4 is an interesting move. And this all comes out to something that's, I think, relatively equal, maybe even better for black. It's kind of a gambit line, I think. I think black just comes back to d6 here, is that right? My memory is terrible. Oh, okay, and then plays here. And if white really wants to play f3, well, good luck to him, because that pawn will be terribly weak. So this may even be better for black already. It may just be equal, but it's certainly white has nothing is the idea. Knight g5 is different. Knight g5 is interesting. Because now, again, d3 should be played. And this has been played pretty often, this position. And again, black stands pretty well for similar reasons to what we just saw. But really, white should play queen takes. And now black is just being tempted into taking this. Now maybe instead he should play knight out. I'm not sure. But the natural thing to do is there, because normally a knight getting caught in the corner with black having terrific development. And we looked at this a couple weeks ago very briefly. I think I just speculated on this. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't play king d8. That was a horrible move. If king d8, knight e6 check. A trick that comes up in the Linkspringer variation, by the way. Comes up in a couple openings. Don't ever fall for that. I just did. So you have to play king this way, excuse me. Then he takes that. Now white has a little material advantage, but black is getting through really fast, and that's the best way to do it. Turns out that's actually better than bishop b4 check, which just doesn't seem to work out that well. Now black's idea is, he's going to get even more time if white takes that pawn. So white won't take that pawn. White will simply play something like, I'll try to get castled queenside. Oh no, rook d1, I guess, is the best first move. And now black can go ahead and play check, and maybe rook e8 check. Or actually, it's better probably not to play rook e8 check. It's probably better to play here and try and trap the knight. And this position's not that clear, actually. It's sort of interesting. I looked at it a bunch, but black is okay at any rate. So what all that all means when you add it all up is knight takes pawn looks like a pretty sound move, and might be the real problem in Belgrade. I don't know if Elliot agrees with that. It could be that knight takes e4 is in fact a better move than what Karpov played. But Karpov is just playing to get a game. He's used to beating everybody, and he just wants to get out. He doesn't want to fall for any tricks. So this is how the game went, and we'll just kind of stop there. Now supposedly this is a bad move now here because of knight b5. Castles has actually been given a question mark, but I don't believe this at all. I think black's doing perfectly well here after this. For some reason a6 hasn't been played, but it just seems to be perfectly good. No problems at all here for black. And he hasn't even lost the bishop pair. But what white can do, and what good players undoubtedly know, is that the move knight here is more of a problem because you're going to win the bishop pair. And I won't go into a lot of detail there, but it turns out this is very slightly better for white, or maybe equal, but a little easier to play for white. So that's why castles probably isn't the best move. That's why Karpov played simply takes. And now he castles because he's going to play bishop f6 with tempo on the queen and maybe rook e8. So white gets his pieces out. And some people seem to think that black's better here. I don't believe that. I think it's just a game. Oh, by the way, white also could have played queen d3. Tal, of all people, Michael Tal, the world champion, Misha Tal, played the move queen d3 and got an equal game. So that indicates that this whole position is probably about equal. But even this here, I think, is fine. It's interesting to see how Karpov outplays his opponent as usual. What really happens is white starts neglecting development. Look, this pawn move, then this pawn move especially. And black simply piles up on the file and gets a good game. A very good move right now, by the way, was this, and I think black's just better here. Just getting doubled and kind of taking a little bit of an eye on the king side. White's got to be a little careful about that king side. But the game went here, which is also a good move. And the rook's getting active. But white managed to, okay, so white abandons the king side to play queen b3, and black plays this nice move c5 defending that, and now white says, okay, I better get moving, but that gives up the center, his one big advantage, which was the pawn in the center, and now the center can kind of start moving. So fortunately, these positions are solid enough that white is not lost, but he's already worse now. If you look at this position, it's just black has the initiative. He's got a little bit of a few threats maybe on the king side. He's got the center that might become mobile, and he has the file. So it's really pretty much that simple. And what happens here is that black defends well, and white doesn't ever quite get through. This bishop is aiming this way now. Oh, this is a great move. So having gotten all his pieces in a good position, but not being able to actually play for a checkmate or anything, black makes this nice expansionary move to weaken white's king side. Space. The Russians were always amazing at getting space. And still are. All good players are, but there was something about Russian chess. There's always just get a little more space. So now he walks over there and plays back again. The idea is to create this weakness, and now he's attacking the rook there. So, and notice that, well, okay, the point is this is kind of a bad bishop now. So now black has the idea of maybe attacking with h4. White does manage to counterattack just in time here. Does a great job here of counterattacking, even though black is better. And now he does something kind of weird though. Black ends up winning material here. This is a very pretty move. This move. It's nice to see tactics at the end of the game. Oh, here we go. Note from Elliot. We might go back. I might get back to that. But at any rate, let's finish this game. If white takes, we have rook takes, e3. And if queen takes, we have rook g4. So black simply can't take that pawn back. So white can't take that pawn back. So white is a pawn behind, but luckily he's got his own attack going on here. So he simply captures on b6 and thinks about playing rook takes d5. And black comes back again. And rook g4 is a threat again, so white has to start running. But it turns out it's just hard sometimes, you know, with this kind of structure and with this many few pieces left, to actually get a checkmate. And somehow white manages to recover. So I won't show you all the details. Black was better the entire game here, but white managed to get a pawn down rook endgame. And it was hard to avoid, actually. These are all pretty well played moves. Sachs was a very good player, and in this case he played excellently. Imagine drawing Karpov a pawn down. You know, it's pretty amazing. But he gets to this position. There's various versions of this endgame. This was probably a bad one. Black probably should have taken here and just given up this pawn and tried to draw that one. Tried to win that one. That was probably objectively drawn also, but this one actually is pretty easy. There's a check. And how is black ever going to win this? You can imagine. These pawns are split, and they took a draw pretty early here. White tried for a while. Oh, well, white did something very interesting. He decided to let the pawn advance because he knows he can win it eventually. And this king is just too exposed. So I looked at this a little bit, and there's no way to improve, really. You know, you'd think, oh, this is... Black's getting chances here, but he really isn't. And I think already here he took a draw. So it was a fun game, interesting game. Now, what was the point of that game again? In answer to the question was what to do about the Belgrade Gambit. And my current feeling, having looked at these things, is that black should probably just take this. And Elliot was talking about this line with captures f5, knight up, here. I think queen takes is better. Turns out this one's really almost impossible to hold for white, or white's got real problems here. Because after check, you can just go here. And I looked at this, and I can't remember what the ideas all are. Looks like white's got a little something here, but I don't think he does. Now, why is that? I think c6 is strong. Yeah, and somehow it all works. It all redounds to black's benefit, and that's not me saying that because I'm a genius or something. It's just because I worked it out. I looked at it. So that's why queen takes is so much better move. And even though black gets that knight trapped in the corner, it's still very interesting. It's an interesting position, whereas the other one's just better for black. Just flat out better for black. But in either case, black's probably a little better, even with the one with the knight in the corner. So it looks like knight takes e4 is just a very good move. So that would be my answer if you had time to prepare, is just play knight takes e4. If you don't have time to prepare, Karpov's move is obviously sufficient, but I would say only equal. This is only an equal position. Yeah, it was a nice game by Karpov. It really was. It's very interesting how he... On the other hand, he only drew it. So it goes to show you can play all these wonderful moves and somehow you only get a draw anyway. So that's chess. That's the cruelty of chess. But of course, Sachs was an excellent player. At the time, he was a candidate. He got into the candidates and was really a very, very strong player. Okay, no more new comments. And I'd just like to say to everybody, thanks for coming on. I love it. I love all the questions. And I'm sorry for not getting to more of your things that you sent me or things that we've been stalling on for the last couple of weeks. But we will cover some of the lines that we didn't cover this week, next week. And I'll also take anything from the chat. For example, there was the question about the Peertz defense, and there was the question about the Dutch. I guess I sort of answered the Dutch a little bit. And maybe I'll address those real briefly and at least do some sort of outline of what you can choose from, what kind of systems you can choose from. Basically, when you send me things, the more specific they are, the easier they are to talk about. Because then we get a focus on a particular thing. If you just ask me, what do you think of this, the Sicilian or something, it's going to be hard to talk about because there's the closed Sicilian, there's open, and there's 100 different types of open Sicilians on top of 100 variations within each one of those, and so the more specific you can be when you ask a question. If you send me a game and ask me about whatever part you want to, the end game, the opening, the middle game, just sort of, or what I think was going on in general, that's fine. And I'll try to answer as many things as you can send me. That's askimwatson@chessclub.com. ASKIM, that stands for International Master. So ASKIM Watson WATSON, at chessclub.com. That's one word. And as I say, if you're an ICC member, you can also message me, message space John L. Watson, L as in lion, one word, and send me a question that way. Thank you, everybody. It was fun. You guys were great. Really interesting comments by everybody. I'm really glad to hear some of you made some really excellent comments. So I hope I'll see you again next week. And tell your friends to come on and meet us all next week. Thank you.